Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church weekly podcast. Conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Well, greetings to our Ephrata Community Church family and extended family, because we know there's many that will tune into this podcast every week. Thank you for connecting with us today. Just so you know who we are, likely most of you may know my name is Wes, one of the pastors here at Ephrata Community Church. And today with me, I have a special friend and guest, Matthew Gehman. Matthew and his wife Linda are part of our church family, members here, and they're serving the Lord actually overseas. They just are in the area, obviously with COVID and some of the other things that are happening overseas currently. But anyway, they're here with their family. And they were a part of this past weekend with the Feldhams here. We're going to talk a little bit about that here today. And I just wanted to begin by saying, welcome, Matthew. Great to have you with me today. Thanks for allowing me to rope you in this morning today.
Hey, thanks so much. Yeah, doing a little internship here with some of the church leadership, and they said, hey, interns available for anything, and then they signed me up the next moment. So
that's how it works around here. That's right. So if you want to be an intern, we sign you up and rope you in. We don't tell you what all you're going to do. So, but I'm just delighted. We so appreciate you and your family, and we're excited to have you here.
Thank you.
And also receiving in this season. I'm sure it's refreshing to you as well.
Yeah, our absolute delight during this time has been getting to fellowship with the body here, and being able to be a part of corporate worship in our own language is amazingly refreshing, and just encourages the heart so very much. Yeah, we've loved that.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about today, we want to talk about Jeff and Shanti Feldham who were here this past weekend. And one of the reasons we actually don't bring in guest speakers just for the purpose of bringing in guest speakers. We're pretty purposeful. In fact, if you talk to Kevin's very clear and purposeful about who comes, and we're actually looking for people that can resource us as a people, as a congregation. Jeff and Shanti were here 2 times prior to this past weekend, mostly around relationships and marriage. They have written a bunch of books, and Matthew and I were talking before we came in to record this today. Was one of the resources we actually read in premarital as well. Teresa and I did, and I think you and Linda did. Was this For Men Only and For Women Only? And Matthew, this past weekend I was at the book table with Jeff, and I said, hey, a little secret. Actually, I read For Women Only first before Men Only, and then laughing, he said, you know what? He said, actually, we encourage that. We really encourage that. Jeff and Shanti have great resources for relationships, but particularly in marriage. And so I really encourage you, even if you're single, these are fantastic resources, because one of the things they did on Friday night was talk about the differences between men and women, and these 2 books help with that and help go a little bit deeper in that.
Yeah, I like the tagline on the back there. It says, the For Men Only says, finally you can understand her. Might be a bit hyperbole, but it is. Yeah, it was so helpful. I remember reading it when we were dating, and just thinking through some, especially like communication things, just how women communicate and how my wife communicates, how I communicate. The book was really, really helpful for us.
Yeah. There's such great resources. And by the way, if you were not able to tune in to all of them, or maybe any of those events this weekend, we're going to have them all online. You can find them. They'll be in a package. So just to unpack a little bit, Friday night, they talked kind of about the differences between men and women. They also touched a little bit on this book, which is an excellent resource, The Surprising Secrets of a Highly Happy Marriages. And there's 12 principles in here. They talked about one of them on Friday night. Do you remember what that was? I'm going to test you here. Think the best. Remember?
Yes.
Yeah. It's one of the 12 principles is to think the best of your spouse. That has been so helpful, I know, to Teresa and I, and it was good to hear that again and be reminded of that.
Yeah, it's something that you would think, like, hey, you love this person, it should come easy, but at least for me, it doesn't always. And actually, being back in the States, Linda and I have been doing some just couples counseling, and that's something the counselor talked about a lot was, you have all these stressors, you have all these things going on in your life, And it makes such a difference when you're viewing your spouse with good intentions towards you. Instead of like, oh, they're fighting against me, or why did they do this, which is my natural tendency to move a little, especially when like there's a lot of hard things going on or stress going on. Then you can kind of view everybody else as fighting against you. But that idea of, hey, you know what, this person loves me and they have good intentions towards me is really transformative.
Yeah. And, it's so helpful because we often think the worst, right? That's kind of our natural response. And, this principle of thinking the best, I have found can be translated beyond marriage. Like I found that even in management and working with people. I found that in multiple relationships, even with family, like thinking the best of others. And so it's been a very helpful tool in marriage, certainly, but even beyond. And so that was a lot of Friday night, talking about the differences between men and women and kind of addressing some of those pieces in that. And then Saturday morning, they did a session on this book, Thriving in Love and Marriage. It's a newer resource that they released. And actually, they encouraged couples to read through this separately and then highlight and make notes in it in regards to, in fact, I'm paging through it. You can see I worked through it and I put a W for Wes, right? And Teresa worked through it and she put T's. And so we're actually working through this currently. And that's how they actually designed the book, that you read through it separately and then talk about, money. And obviously money can be a big stressor in marriage. And maybe it's not for you. Maybe it never has been for you guys.
Yeah, well, I forget what they said the percentage was of, but it was a really high percentage for how that stresses people in relationships. It's something we've definitely grown in throughout our relationship. I think we came into the relationship with different ideas about how money would work, but we've been married, it'll be 12 years this year. So we've had some time to kind of work through that. It's not a huge stressor usually for us, but actually, so I came into this session Saturday morning kind of like, well, it's not a big stressor for us. I don't know how much I'm going to get out of this. My expectations were not super high, but I really appreciated it. They talked a lot about like, what are your values and what are your partner's values? So how, when you think about what you're going to spend money on or what you're going to spend time on or something like that, like, are you doing it only based on your values? Are you thinking about investing in things that your family values, that your wife values? And that was good for me to hear. It's a
values-based thing, right? Yeah, and it's such a refreshing way to actually look at this whole how we spend money. I think one of the phrases they used was, making investments. Are we making kind of I kind of forget the phrase now. It's not coming to my mind. But are we making an investment or are we just making an expenditure, right? So is it just an expenditure that we're making? And so sometimes I can see my wife spending on something and think like, why did we need that? Why is she doing that? And there's value behind it. There's meaning. There's a purpose behind it. And so if I can think the best and if I can see the value in it, it helps me understand an expenditure. And
they kind of go hand in hand in some ways. Like if you realize, hey, my wife is valuing this thing, then the actions you might realize, oh, they are, like what they're doing is not against me. It's actually because they value this and want it for our family or whatever. Oh, they're thinking the best about me in this situation, even if it feels contradictory or whatever. Yeah.
One of the other things we found helpful and encouraging with Jeff and Shanti, and maybe you want to make some comments on it. In fact, why don't you make a few comments on why you enjoy listening to them? You were chatting a little bit before we came in here.
Yeah, well, I just finished a psychology class at college, and sitting in there teaching, I was like, I feel like it's somewhat unusual for me to hear someone who brings this. They do such research, like amazing research and data, have all these statistics, find out really valuable information, but then they do such a great job of then applying like psychological principles and how people's mind interact with these things. But then saying, hey, look, this is how it lines up with the Bible. And they said over and over, like, our research confirmed what the Bible said.
Shocking, right?
Yeah. I really appreciated how they brought those things together and had the spiritual aspect, the psychological aspect, and just the hard data. Like, hey, this is what people said about these things.
And it supports truth, right?
Yeah.
And, one of the other things that they always, in fact, even in their times here before, that they have helped to debunk is some false information information out there about marriages,
Yeah.
right? Like how horrible the divorce rate is
Right.
and how terrible it is in the church. And actually the data doesn't support that.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons we just want to encourage and we use and have brought Jeff and Shanti here is just to help resource us as a congregation and be reminded that there are actually really good marriages out there.
Yeah.
There are people that are doing well. Now, there's things we can always learn and to grow in. That's part of our spiritual journey, right? Even with the Lord, there's always things to be growing in. And yes, it's not to negate that there are difficult marriages and some are struggling and divorce is part of brokenness in our society, but there is hope and there's such good information. So to your point, like bringing the psychological, bringing the statistics, the data within it, and then bringing the spiritual, there is so much hope. And I think they even said, if I remember right, a Christian marriage, a marriage that is centered in Jesus Christ, like is off the charts in success rate. And so the percentage of failure or divorce within a Christian marriage is actually very minimal compared to what the national statistics would want you to believe. And so I think that's very encouraging.
Yeah, it made me think of when my wife and I were engaged, like random people in the store or whatever would see the ring and make these crazy comments like, oh, we're so sorry for you. Like, oh, you don't know what you're getting into. And they were wrong for one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But we kind of made it our thing after that, after we got married, to tell couples that are engaged, like, oh man, it's so much better than you can even imagine. Yeah. Like when you're walking with each other and pursuing the Lord together, there's so much hope there. There's so much wonder there. It is better than you can even imagine.
Yeah. And I'm just take a moment and just speak because I know that not everybody is thriving in marriage, right?
True.
And so we do acknowledge that. We do acknowledge the challenges that come with that. But we want to let you know that we're here to support you. If we can connect you to a counselor or a mentor or somebody to pray for you or support you, like we are here. That's what the church is for. That's what the body of Christ is for. So there's no shame in that, right? You're like, well, I'm not like, Matthew and Linda's marriage. I'm not as awesome as that. Actually, it's okay, right? But there's hope. You can be, right? And so we have resources available. We just want to encourage us. Please contact the church. Contact one of us as pastors. We're here to serve you and network. Again, we want to provide resources in your journey in marriage as well. So it was very, very helpful to have them focus on those sessions on Friday night and Saturday morning, particularly. And then we actually participated in part of their data collection. Yeah. They did a survey they separated the men and the women, and I won't talk about the subject that they asked us on. It was sex. But anyway, they asked us some questions on a survey, and it's actually part of the data collection they're doing for some of the project they're working on currently, and it'll be the next book. Because obviously intimacy in marriage is another one of the issues that they're just collecting some good data, psychological pieces around it, and it'll obviously support the truths that are in God's word. As it says in Hebrews, marriage is to be honored by all. And so I really appreciate what they've brought to the table on that. And then on Sunday, they did 3 different services, kind of interview style. And again, I encourage you to go back and watch any of them. Shanti's wrote 3 devotionals on the subjects of joy, peace, and rest. And so the 3 weekend services touched all 3 of those topics. And so they're devotionals, particularly written, for women. However, they're broad. They can be used for us as men as well. But those key topics were highlighted this past week. And that was significant even when it was Mother's Day. Only God could design that, right? Because it was canceled for them to come back in February because of snow. Not here, but also here and in Atlanta. Crazy, isn't that? To think that was just a few months ago. But we just encourage you to go back and look at those resources. They sold out this weekend. They had a book table. Like the resources went off. It was great. So we're glad that we got resources in the hands of many, but you can purchase these online, obviously, as well. Matthew, as we bring this podcast to a close today, is there anything particularly, any kind of last words or thoughts that you have or reflections from the weekend? Maybe something you and Linda talked about or just something out of your own that God just kind of been stirring within you in this season as you reflect on this past weekend? Yeah,
I was just thinking as you're talking about the Saturday and Sunday services, they weren't specifically on marriage, but I'd echo the call to go back and watch them or listen to them, because I felt like Shanti was so vulnerable in sharing like her story with cancer and some of the things their son has gone through.
Which is very recent.
Yeah.
Her cancer has
Very,
been
very
very
recent.
recent. She's still in that process.
But then like talking about joy in the midst of those things, the joy in the midst of COVID even, and those things connected because it like we've all gone through so
they're
much in the last year. Yeah,
They're so applicable.
It was very encouraging and very authentic. I really appreciated it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, if you saw one or a couple or would like to see that again or haven't seen any of it, please go back. It's a wonderful resource. And we just encourage you. And again, that's up on our website. There's a package of all those messages there. And so anyway, it was just a joy to host them here. You know, one of the other things we appreciate about Jeff and Shanti, they're usually the first ones to our building. And they're some of the last ones to leave because they just love people. And we could just so feel their heart as they just were here just to impart. And we really felt like God had some things to impart to us this past weekend as they shared. Yeah. And so, Matthew, thank you. Thank you for jumping in here with me today. And thanks, too, for just reflecting as you and Linda are on this journey together and your family. And to you, as you are on a journey as well in your marriage or in relationships with others, we just trust these resources will be a benefit to you and a blessing to you. So thanks for tuning in today. We look forward to this coming weekend as we continue in this series in the invisible kingdoms. And we look forward to what God has. God bless you today. We love you. We pray for you and be encouraged because God is with you. Amen. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening and that you'll join us again next week. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us by visiting EphphatACommunityChurch.com.